Hi, social media family. Hi, social media family. I'm RamonaPhillips, a healthy mind strategist, helping hurting people grow past that trauma into authentic leadership, regardless of the area of expertise. And tonight, I want to talk about the stress that Olympic athletes have experienced with COVID-19. And the fact that although they're known to be very resilient with special qualities, they still have a mental health to address. So in 2020, the Olympics did happen in Tokyo, but I want to share with you what the athletes had to go through. Okay? So the stress of being a professional athlete is enough to affect someone's mental health under the best circumstances. Now throw in a pandemic, postpone Olympics, and then when the games finally start, a lack of loved ones there to support you in the stands, and the stress can become overwhelming. As athletes gear up for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, as they geared up, right? They reflected on the taxing year they've had preparing, and the stress still to come once the game begins, or once the game began on July 23rd, 2020. The delay alone created plenty of anxiety for athletes. Olympic fencer Curtis McDowell recalls wondering, how do I train for an event that means so much but might not happen? I tried my best to simply train as best as I could every day. If Tokyo happens, great, I'm ready. If it doesn't, great. Guess what? I'm getting a head start to prepare for Paris in 2024. So that's one way that we can choose positive mindsets. One way that we can take care of our mental health is by shifting our mindset, being mindful of how we feel, what we're thinking, right? How our thoughts are affecting us, right? And then make a conscious decision. Do I need to change this thought? Do I need to change this thought, right? So anyway, with self-described tunnel vision for the Olympics, it was difficult dealing with finally having to look at my emotional and mental well-being. Many of us choose to neglect mental health till after our competitions. They choose to neglect mental health until after the competition? Wow. An October 2020 study found that professional athletes were much more likely to experience anxiety or depression during COVID-19 than pre-pandemic. Between mid-March and August 2020, 22.3% of athletes felt down or depressed at least half of the week, compared to 3.9% before restrictions started that year. That's a big leap. 22.5% experienced some form of depression, lowered feelings, right? Some form of anxiety, versus 3.9% before restrictions. So anxiety and nervousness followed a similar pattern, with 27.9% of participants reporting feeling these emotions. 27.9% of participants reported feeling those emotions. So how many was feeling those emotions and just refused to say anything, afraid of the stigma, right? 27.9% of participants reporting feeling these emotions compared to 4.7% pre-pandemic. So Kim Plowd, a licensed therapist, clinical social worker, Thrive Works Lynchburg, and a member of the Alliance of Social Workers in Sport, says that elite athletes may have experienced stress, depression, and anxiety due to changes in regular routines, right? Which occurred abruptly with no planning. Change is hard as it is, and then it's even harder when change attacks us abruptly, just comes out of nowhere. Change, right? They have had to adjust and adapt, which has been difficult for some, causing increased anxiety and depression, with some losing their last season as an athlete or having to readjust plans for the following year. So, were Olympians, no, here we go. We're Olympians, Curtis says. We're Olympians. We're supposed to be the image of strength and stability, mental toughness, and victorious emotions. Now, while he's part of the first United States men's epi team to go to the Olympics since 2004, there's still one moral hurdle weighing on McDowell: the potential of catching COVID-19 during travel to Tokyo and being disqualified from competing. Got a lot to worry about, huh? We are all trying our best to stay safe and protect ourselves and those around us, he says. But the traveling itself is a big risk. And athletes have contracted COVID from travel already, he says. So Regina Salmon says, who will represent the United States as part of the women's rowing team's women's 8, shares McDowell's concern about contracting COVID at the last minute. It's a stress that comes after a long-held fear of getting the virus and losing her chance to compete. With rowing, your aerobic base is huge. And so to have your lungs affected is really crushing, she says. Not only was I worried about potentially losing a month or 2 of training, but I was also worried about COVID potentially ending my career, Regina says. After spending a few months training alone at her parents' home or socially distancing with her high school coach, Salmons and her teammates returned to the training center in July 2020. At the center, her anxiety around COVID increased. For months, Salmons saw almost no one but her teammates, a group that she said really heavily relied on each other when COVID stress became all-consuming. So mentally preparing to compete, that had to be very difficult. Triple jumper Tori Franklin faced similar levels of anxiety and depression as her fellow athletes throughout the pandemic, but with the Olympics finally in view, she says she feels pretty good. But let me tell you why. Track and field is a space that has regularly brought Franklin's sanity. She credits it as a saving grace for her during bouts of undiagnosed mild depression. Franklin attributes part of her current calm going towards the games to a daily, intentional ritual. So she takes her mental health seriously. She already has a ritual in place, something that she does every day that helps her to prepare mentally to compete. So she meditates and relays positive. She meditates and relays positive affirmations to herself before looking at her phone in the morning. Also, as a self-described introverted extrovert, she balances spending quality time with loved ones and time alone organizing her thoughts and overall self. So she takes time for people that's important to her, right? But she also takes time for herself. That balance, she has that balance. Franklin also writes about her feelings in online posts. So she gets in touch with her feelings and she gets vulnerable and she writes about her feelings. Franklin also writes about her feelings on online posts and is writing a mental health book to open up the door for others to share their own experiences with mental health and high-level athletes. So after the Olympics concluded on August the 8th, more athletes will head to Tokyo for the 2020 Paralympics. Paralympics games, which kick off on August the 24th. That was last year, okay? While most did not welcome the delay, it provided swimmer Morgan Stickney an opportunity to compete. If the games weren't postponed, I wouldn't have made the team because I just lost my legs and had minimal training, she explains. After learning of the delay, she began training 3 times a day to earn a spot on the team. So something good came out of it, right? Stickney's hard work paid off, but her excitement is coupled with anxiety about her first time competing on an international stage. When it comes to the big stage, I tend to get really nervous, and it drastically shows in my performance. So I've just been trying to work on being confident in who I am, my training, and not worrying about anyone else or what other people are doing. So how do we overcome? How do the athletes overcome? Overcoming mental health stigma in elite sports. That had to be difficult too, right? Facing mental health challenges as athletes is made more complicated by the prevailing stigma in elite sports around sharing feelings. According to a 2019 review of 13,000 elite athletes across 71 sports, multiple factors are to blame for a lack of mental health care and discussion in high-level athletes. Across 52 included studies, stigma was the primary deterrent elite athletes reported as to why they did not seek help for mental health issues, worrying about what other people will say, what other people may think. I was reading a book called When People Are Big and God is Small. I recommend that book because sometimes we worry so much about other people, right? We forget that God is greater, and what's most important is God is with us and God is available to help us, and what he thinks is so much more important than what other people think, especially other people's opinions or perceptions, right? So, stigma. Because of stigma, people would not reach out for help. A lack of mental health literacy, previous negative experience when seeking help, and busy schedules were additional barriers named. Athletes who didn't identify as white males also stated points such as feeling a lack of acceptance in sports and finances. That's a nice way to put it. Athletes who did not identify as white males also stated points such as feeling a lack of acceptance in sports and finances. So they were worried about even being accepted. God forbid they said they had a mental health issue. They were struggling with anxiety or fear or worry or depression, right? I think for anyone it's difficult. I think for anyone it's difficult to speak about mental health issues. Anyone. And then when you ask someone that is the best in whatever they do, it can be even harder. People don't like to talk about mental health because it can be seen as a weakness. But I think it's so important to express your feelings and emotions, especially in sports. When you get to the top or elite in sports, the majority of it is mental. Oh, man, let me say that again. When you get to the top or elite in sports, the majority of it is mental. So it's so important that we all take care of our mental health, especially if we are athletes, right? So we all train so hard, but it comes down to the mental aspect, Stickney says. Salmon echoes Stickney's sentiment. I've yet to meet a single professional or elite athlete who doesn't have bad days or doesn't have a hard time with mental health at one point or another. Just like getting sore from weights or being injured, your mental health gets broken down and gets built back up too. Salmons is thankful that throughout training, her team created a positive environment where anyone could speak out, and for the two team psychologists who work with them as individuals and the group throughout the pandemic. That's beautiful, right? They formed a support group. They actually formed a positive environment, a support group, a safe environment where they can actually talk about their feelings, their fears, their anxieties, how they were feeling. And it makes it a safe environment because there's that lack of judgment. People get the opportunity not to judge, to accept the fact that we're all in this together, right? I've yet to meet a single professional or elite athlete who doesn't have bad days or doesn't have a hard time with mental health at one point or another. Just like getting sore from weights or being injured, your mental health gets broken down and gets built back up, right? Especially when you're going through a hard time, there's going to be tough times. When in life, things happen in life, and our mental health sometimes begins to, I don't want to say deteriorate. I'm just going to say we all have tough times. We all have those seasons in life where we're going through a difficult time. And we're supposed to acknowledge, I'm going through a difficult time right now. Now, what do I do to make sure that I'm taking care of myself? Wait a minute, I'm an athlete. I must make sure that I release this negative energy, talk about it, right? So that I can make a conscious decision. Now, what's my next move? What am I going to do to take care of myself? Do I have a ritual? Then I need to adopt a daily ritual, right? And reach out for help. So acknowledging and asking for help with potential mental health issues allows Olympians to gain insight into healthily dealing with them. Asking for help. Knowledge is power. Getting the help you need, allowing yourself to be vulnerable. Are we scared to be vulnerable, aren't we? Allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. What's so-and-so going to think? Shows wisdom. Wait a minute. Getting the help you need, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and human, shows wisdom, courage, and strength. It shows wisdom, courage, and strength. So it's so important that you reach out and ask for help. If you are an athlete, it's so important. Support from loved ones has acted as a steadying force for Olympians as they navigate this difficult time. McDowell and Salmons each credit their families continual love and support with helping them through training and pandemic anxieties. Franklin's mom and grandmom are organizing viewing parties so her loved ones can show their support to be with her in spirit as she competes, right? Because remember, the stands are not full like they were before, right? Stickney says that while she had hoped to have her family and surgeon with her in Tokyo, knowing they will be watching her from home is comforting. Plus, she admits not having crowds watching in person takes the pressure off a bit. So everyone has their own perception about the crowds being there. Then you have some that really miss the crowds. I remember watching the basketball players, and it just looked really strange. A lot of us, I'm sure, watching them on TV, and no one is on the stands. There is just the team is on the court. And I wonder, how do they feel? How do they feel? I was wondering, how is that really affecting them? So anyway, the pandemic has spurred new conversations about mental health in mainstream and athletic circles. So that's good, right? It's an openness. Kim hopes will allow athletes to experience mental health care as acceptable, encouraged, and considered part of one's overall training. We're Olympians. We're supposed to be the image of strength and stability, mental toughness, and victorious emotions, McDowell says. But the pressure these elite athletes are under is immense. medal or not, many athletes who compete at the games will feel some level of depression. The reality is, many athletes have been working hard since childhood for a moment that may only last mere seconds, where the difference of winning and losing is a fraction of a second, and millions of people all over the world are watching, right? So it's so important that they reach out for help, especially if you are an athlete. All of us have a mental health, and it's important. It's important that we take responsibility to take care of our mental health. I call it participating in our own recovery process, because God is not going to do it all for us. God is available to help us. He places people in our lives to support us, right? We have to be open to that support, and we have to be willing to be vulnerable, which is not always an easy thing to do. We have to be willing to address, well, what are we saying to ourselves? What is my self-talk saying to me? Don't say anything. What are people going to think? What is the coach going to think? What are my friends going to think, right? Right? But it's so important, and it's so important that safe place was created for them, that support group, and then they had psychologists and they had family members and loved ones supporting them. We need support. We can't do life by ourselves. I know a lot of us, we struggle with trust and things like that, but we have to remind ourselves God did not place us here to do life by ourselves, right? And we get healthier and we get stronger, and it's even wiser when we step out and ask for help. It's not an easy thing to do, but when we face our fears and our need to control, we step out in faith. It's also an act of self-love. That's also an act of self-love. There are people that care, and you're not going through it all by yourself. And although some people are not saying anything, it is so rewarding when someone steps out and say, hey, I'm struggling. I'm having so much anxiety right now. Or I'm depressed. I feel like I'm depressed, right? Or I'm nervous. I'm feeling all of this nervous energy. And when someone steps out and says, hey, I'm human, and this is what I'm feeling, and I have emotions, and I'm hurting or I'm scared right now, it helps other people. It's like it's a trickle effect, right? Other people, all of a sudden, it gives other people permission to say, hey, you know what? Me too. Me too. Me too. Guess what? Me too. Right? Right? People come together and support one another. It's very, very important. So, if you are an athlete and you're watching this, reach out for help. You're struggling, reach out for help. If you're not an athlete, please be mindful of judgment, right? And expectations, right? And be aware of the fact that although they're athletes and they have these special qualities, they're also very human. They're very human with feelings, right? With fears. They experience that negative energy from time to time too. With problems, right? Like everyone else. Like everyone else. So let's look for what we have in common, instead of putting all of these people in different categories, because it's the division that's causing major problems. It's the division, right? Thank God for support groups. Thank God for those who have stood up. Thank God for those who share their story. Thank God for the help that's available, okay? I'm RamonaPhillips, the Healthy Mind Strategist. I'll talk to you guys later. Oh, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, okay? Talk to you later. Bye-bye.